colleague Erin Hale is also here. We are from the New Hampshire Food Alliance. We are a network coordinated underneath the Sustainability Institute at UNH, and we focus on all things food systems at the Food Alliance. So today we're having a wonderful guest speaker to talk about two initiatives she is very well versed on and very excited to share about. Lisa Fernandes, who is the Communications Director for Food Solutions New England. She has some slides that she's sharing here now, and she's going to talk a little bit about the 30 by 30 food vision, as well as the 21-day racial equity habit building challenge. So Lisa, please take it away.
Great, thanks Colleen. Great to see everybody, and thanks for having me. I'd love to collaborate with my coworkers at the Sustainability Institute. This is a great opportunity. I will take just a couple, 3 minutes to give some background and then get into the New England Food Vision update and the 21-day racial equity challenge for this year. I know that this is probably a mixed audience in terms of people who are already versed in some of those things and maybe some people that are new to both of those things that are part of our regional food system network. So my apologies if some of this is a repeat for those of you who are already kind of entrenched in the regional food system conversation, but never hurts to hear it more than once, I guess, and really glad that you're all here today. So just want to acknowledge right out of the gate that even using the term New England in the name of Food Solutions New England is a colonial construct. Settler colonial construct, and that we are obviously here settled on the lands of many different indigenous peoples. And a big part of our work is to continue to learn about their traditional foodways and be in solidarity with whatever they decide they need for their well-being and food sovereignty and food justice and land access into the future. So just want to get that right out, full transparency. Even some of the ways we name our projects can be a little bit of a problem sometimes. Want to also say that I come to this work from a background in sort of household, community, neighborhood, food system organizing, as well as state level food system organizing. So I was very much involved in the state of Maine efforts at localizing our food system over the past 15 years, and then came to Food Solutions New England about 4 years ago. This is my 1/3 acre place where I live. Just a little sketch. We've completely turned it into an edible, renewable energy kind of landscape. And a picture of my backyard. Not right now. This would be like August. So a big part of my sort of my personal ethos, just to bring that into the room, is to support people, organizations, neighborhoods, communities in whatever capacity works for them to play an active role in their own food future and food destiny. So fully owning that piece of who I am. FSNE, as some of you know, this might just be a quick review, but to say that the vision of the network is that we really become a powerful movement. We're made up of organizations, businesses, entities, individuals, faith groups, universities. There's just so many different types of folks involved in the network. And you know, what does it take to go from being a network to a movement that has the power to make change in our region? So that's kind of what the network is all about. Somebody accidentally drew a few lines on there. I'm not sure how that happened. It might be someone in the audience. I don't think I did it, but the network mission is to unite all of us around 4 values. And I just want to name those really quickly because we feel like those 4 values are super important for getting to the goals that are in the New England Food Vision. It's democratic empowerment, right? Democratizing the food system is a really central piece here. Racial equity and dignity for all. So having that be centered in whatever we're building and how we do the work. We still have a lot more improvement to do there, obviously. sustainability in all its forms, ecological, cultural, economic, and then trust, which is like the glue, the connective tissue that holds a network of many different players together, building trust and relationship with one another, because that's the container within which we have the best chance at doing food system transformation. And just to build on that, FSNE works on 4 impact areas, like what's the best use of a network? And for us right now, it's strengthening all of this connective tissue. That's the network building and strengthening piece, centering racial equity and these other values, really working on shifting the narratives that we use. The world is made of stories, and the way we think about things what our actions are predicated on what we believe often. And so if we can start shifting the dominant stories about the food system, we have a better chance of transforming it. And then the policy work. So many people doing great policy work, but how do we connect ourselves together for greater impact? And I won't go into this list, but you probably know FSNE from a variety of sort of the visual or visible programs that are available in the world, the Leadership Institute and some of the other stuff that we do. So we'll take a few minutes to talk about New England Food Vision. And then I think we'll be able to have a little bit of a conversation, take some questions about that, and then we'll shift into the racial equity challenge. As we're talking and as we're sharing, if you have a curiosity or a question that comes up for you, I guess feel free to start dropping those in the chat, and Colleen and Aaron can kind of keep an eye on that. We may get to it in the presentation, but just even as a placeholder for something that's on your mind about these topics, that would be great. So a bunch of you are already familiar with New England Food Vision. It came out in 2014. After about 3 years of drafting, redrafting, participation and conversations that occurred at New England food summits predominantly. And it really emerged out of a partner document, I would say, an affiliate document, which is called Wildlands and Woodlands, that Harvard Forest and a number of other people in the forest and land conservation community hatched. And that came out a few years earlier than the Food Vision. But the key thing here is that that was a community coming together and saying, what do we see for our region in the future? It's not a plan, it's not a prescription telling people what to do, but what is like a North Star vision that we can rally around together, with full acknowledgement that there's many, many ways to make that happen, and we need all those ways. So Wildlands and Woodlands called for at least 70% of the land cover of New England to remain in woods and forested cover. You know, that's really the origin ecosystem of our region for the most part. And so the idea with New England Food Vision was, how do we meet a much larger share of our food needs while maintaining at least 70% forest and woodland cover in our region? And, you know, I think when that came out in 2014, there was a big emphasis on one iteration of what was in the vision, which was 50 by 60, or producing 50% of our food in region by 2060. It's not a plan. It's really important to note, like, people will say, well, yeah, a vision is nice, but how do we do it? When it was being created and we said, should this be a plan to actually lay out the strategies? People said, no, 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 every state wants to create its own plan. This should just be a vision. And so it came out as a vision. And people were like, yeah, but where's the plan? So, you know, there's always going to be people who want something different than what is published. But the beauty of that is, within the larger vision, there's so much room for all kinds of different groups to develop their piece of work that helps move us all toward that particular shared vision. Just having a shared vision is actually quite unique for regions in the US and in North America. You'll also remember, some of you, that there were 3 diets detailed in the vision. One was business as usual, which is like, this is what we're eating now. One was omnivore's delight, which would get us to 50 by 60. And again, these are averages. They're not telling people how to eat. or to be vegetarian or to be meat eaters or anything at all. It's just saying on average, if we were to get to 50 by 60, this omnivore's delight could be supported by the New England region. The third one, which didn't get as much play at the time, but I have a feeling it's coming back with a vengeance now, is this regional reliance, which is what would it look like if we needed to produce 70% of our food in region by 2060. And there's a variety of reasons why that's getting more interest, the pandemic and climate change being among them, of course. So we'll come back to that in a moment. I do want to say that another big piece of the vision that came out in 2014, and I think it's going to shift a little with this update, is that it started from that place of land use in acres. So it was really looking at acres in production. And again, this was land-based food. Seafood was treated a little differently in there, but in terms of land-based food, it looked historically at how much acreage was in food production in our region by state and in aggregate. So yeah, that's one way to measure. You could measure by nutrients, you could measure by calories, you could measure by weight. I mean, there's so many different ways you could measure the amount of food that we put by dollar value. So all of those are open for consideration by a lot of different people. And again, just a super important, I want to accentuate this, and I think you all maybe have a role to play in this, that this is about growing and regionalizing our food system without compromising or even diminishing farm and forest cover, and really trying to hold on to the integrity of those ecosystems. New York is not part of New England, but New York is trying to develop its own version of a food plan. There are people over there trying to do that. So thanks, Julia, for that question. The reason why I think you have a role in this piece about land use is because right now the media really loves to pit farms against the environment. Like, oh, we can have forests and we can have farms, but one is the enemy of the other. And that's not at all true, but it makes for a good headline. So I would encourage you all to think about, we have great creativity and expertise in our region to say, how can we both produce food and maintain these great ecosystems and forested landscapes? We totally have the land base to do it. So pitting one against the other is a false dichotomy. And so we won't get into it here, but I'll make sure you all have a link to the original if you want it. But the Omnivore's Delight really lays out how that could look in terms of acres. And then the Regional Reliance also lays that out in terms of acres, if we were to meet 70% of our needs. Now, it's important for me to note that if you asked me right now, how are we doing toward this vision? We don't have an answer. There's no one tracking this. However, that's about to change, and I'll mention that in a moment. I also want to fully acknowledge that there are some assumptions and limitations built into the food vision that some of which will be addressed in an update process. But I just want to get this right out there that number one, it was based on certain population projections that, and you all know, projecting the future is throwing darts on the best of days. But if we're really looking at things like climate refugees coming into our region and things like that, I think the population projections need to be evaluated again, because they may not be accurate anymore for our region. The data that we have is based on how food has been produced in the past and how it's currently being produced now, which of course is heavily reliant on fossil fuels and is also predicated on certain reliable weather patterns. I would argue that both of those are open questions at this point. And so can we base future projections on past production methods and weather? I don't know. We are unclear about the potential for home and community food production. There's a token remark in the 2014 vision that says, oh, well, we think that this much could come from home and community and urban ag production, but that's really just a super rough estimate. We don't actually know the potential of that piece. And as someone who grows a lot of food in my own backyard, I'm super interested in that myself. Also, what do these numbers look like if we actually have an economy that pays food chain workers properly? That's a really big issue, and it needs to be taken into account. Our food system obviously is a subset of our economic system, and huge overhauls are needed across the board. What does equitable land and sea access look like, particularly for people of color, the tribes, indigenous people, all the people who have been historically excluded from some of the systems that we have now? I would say that even if the researchers helping to do some of these updates had the best of intentions, there's not a ton of great data yet on the potential for what they call non-conventional or some of these other methods of production that would rely on less fossil fuels. Those data sets are emerging, but they're not uniformly available. Like, it's not just like going to the USDA Ag Census and knowing like, oh, we're just going to pull those numbers. We're literally developing new methodologies and production techniques, and we don't know across the board yet how to extrapolate those necessarily into a whole regional food system. I also, this is my design mind having curiosity here, but what would a food vision for our region look like if we assume that we must make a certain % reduction in fossil fuel use? I mean, we know we need to stop putting it into the air. We know a bunch of sectors are working on that. What does it look like if, farming and fishing, made an assumption that we're going to reduce fossil fuel use by a certain date to a certain %? Like, how would we redesign our system accordingly? And then finally, what are the risks and costs of not regionalizing our food system? I think a lot of folks have their eyes open right now because of the pandemic, what they saw, maybe what they continue to see with supply chain issues. And, with climate change really threatening some of the other places in the world where we get a lot of our food from, the West, with fires and droughts, and there's floods, and like, what are we looking at here? What's the risk? How do we quantify that and make that a motivational force for change? So I'll just close by saying a couple things on this. We'll do a little conversation, then we'll move to the racial equity challenge, I think. But the New England Food Vision has been lifted up and used by a variety of network partners for their own work, and so many examples. The Henry P. Kendall Foundation developed the New England Food Vision Prize for colleges and universities. There's many NGOs and state agencies that have said, okay, what's our role within this vision? How do we bring this alive? What's our unique contribution to moving our whole region forward? And so now we're at a point of updating this thing. And we're starting to really coalesce around this idea of like, what's the stepping stone to 50 by 60 or 70 by 60? Can we get to 30% by 2030? Because we probably are still at somewhere around only 10 or 12% as a region in terms of what we produce in region for our own use. We import so much, we continue to export just as much. So there's a lot to look at here. And I just want to say on the right-hand side of this slide, we know we want to update some assumptions and data. We want to harmonize the New England Food Vision with those values I brought up at the beginning. We absolutely must center, the climate crisis and equity and justice in this next version. And we need to think more critically about production methods. We can't just be totally agnostic and say, we don't care about how it's produced. We're just going to count it. It's time to maybe put our values on the line here and say, what kinds of production methods are consistent with the values that our network holds. So that's emerging. It's still early days in the update. We do want to make sure we democratize this process a little bit more. We are going slow, so timeline wise, I'll mention that in a moment, but we're not rushing this thing out until we get a lot more people able to be involved. And, with a lot of community conversations and a diverse team really looking at it. Erin just shared with you New England Feeding New England. And this is a great example of participants in our regional network, in this case, those 6 state food system planning entities, which has been meeting as a community practice for like almost 10 years. They said, well, our role is to look very specifically at supply chain. And so they got some great funding from USDA and others to do the analysis on some of the data in the food vision, but other data as well, and say, you know, how can we get our supply chain to 30 by 30? So I encourage you to take a look at that project. There's a big update coming up on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday. Maybe Colleen or Erin could share the link if it's not here already, but they're giving an update on their research on looking at supply chain from a bunch of different angles. And the reason why I bring that up is because, just to let you know, updating this New England food vision, like I said, we're going slow to make sure we have as many people involved as possible, because if it is a vision, it needs to feel like you belong to it, that it is yours, you see yourself in it or your organization in it. New England Feeding New England, also known as NEFNE, is a part of this. You know, that research will feed into this bigger New England food vision update, along with community participation and input on you know, a fresh version of this. So yeah, and I want to acknowledge that you know, Donna makes a good remark there that the timeline of 70% by 2060 is not very ambitious. It's fascinating to me, because when the first one came out and people were saying 50 by 60, I felt the same way, like, oh my God, we have to go faster. We can get there much faster than that. But it's a combination of, one, half the people at the New England Food Summit were like, oh my gosh, that's too fast, we'll never get there. And half of us were like, well, that's not fast enough, we need to move faster. So it's really acknowledging that we have the technology, we have the understanding, we have the tools, the tangible tools to do it. It's more about political will and economic structures and social and cultural structures. In the communications world, we're fond of saying, you know, culture eats strategy for lunch. And there's a ton of people that are vested in not making change very quickly. Like, the current system is working for them quite well, and they have a lot of power and wealth. So I'm absolutely with you, Donna, on that. And you know, this is why we need our network to build power as a movement, so that we can start shifting the political, social, and economic will to act on the tools, yes, we already have in our hands. So want to fully acknowledge that. So maybe Colleen, do you feel like moderating a few questions, and then we can talk about the challenge a little bit after that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I think this was a really interesting part first to kick off into our discussion. I haven't seen any questions come in yet. Oh, Donna does have a question. On the food vision update team, is there a farmer panel?
Yeah, well, it's like I say, it's early days. So we're actually in the process of designing all the participation methods. So we are planning to be able to host online, maybe in person, but mostly online events on a variety of topics for a variety of people. So there's not what I would say is a panel. This is an update, not a total rewrite. We don't have the time or the budget, unfortunately, to do a total rewrite and a bunch of New England food summits like we did last time. But the participatory input bubble there is actually doing a lot of heavy lifting, because under that, what you don't see is you know, these online events for farmer groups, for business groups, for fisheries, for food security folks, for land justice and land access folks. So it's a little bit of like, watch this space, because there's going to be like at least 2 to 3 ways to be involved for any particular group of food system participants. And as long as you're on the mailing list for Food Solutions New England, or even NHFA, you'll probably get the alerts on how to engage with all of that. So thank you for that.
Awesome. And Jean had a similar question. I feel like you kind of just answered that. Just getting involved is going to come out in the next, you know, weeks and months. So Jean, stay tuned, because we'll definitely be communicating about those opportunities. You got it, Jane. Elise was asking about the 3 diets that you'd mentioned earlier, and Erin so helpfully put the report in there. I don't know if Elise, if you had any specific questions you wanted to ask about that, you can unmute yourself. If not, any other questions for Lisa? Oh, Casey. What has the feedback been like for farmers/producers thus far? So from that group.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would have to be, it's a mixed bag, like from 2014 to now on the New England food vision in general. Those who get the fact that it's an aspirational vision saying what's possible and not telling people how to do it are appreciative. They're like, okay, we see that there's room for our sectors to grow, expand, diversify in a number of ways. For those in farming and production that are more like, that's great, but tell us how to do it. That's where we would encourage more engagement at the state level, because that's where the ideas in the vision are being translated into actionable plans on the ground. So for example, NHFA and others in New Hampshire working on how specifically do we do this in New Hampshire, Vermont Farm to Plate, Mass Food System Collaborative, and so on. So because it's not our role as a network to tell everyone exactly how this is going to happen, and some people want to be told exactly how this is going to happen, it can be frustrating. And there are some farmers who are like, well, that's great, but what does this mean to me? That's where we're generally encouraging the farming and production community to engage specifically at their state level, if they want to. It's not for everybody, obviously. Not everyone has to.
All right, thank you for that. Let's see, Hannah has a question. I'm having trouble with approaching metrics and current cultural approaches of success indicators. Where does story come into metrics?
Yeah, we could spend a day on that, Hannah.
That's a huge question.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's quantitative and there's qualitative ways at looking at this. And then there's cultural norms that are entirely, encompassing of a whole bunch of ways of thinking and knowing. And I think as FSNE, we're trying to really walk a line between leaning too heavily on the privileged knowledge forms of academic and quantifiable metrics, which are important, we need them. But at the same time, that's not the only way of knowing and being and communicating and envisioning what's possible. Cultures of story, of tradition, of values, and centering that as an equally valid way of knowing and thinking about the vision of what we're trying to achieve is really important, which is, to be totally honest, Hannah, that's why we're slowing down. Because if we just plow ahead and be like, okay, New England feeding New England metrics and research are done, let's just fold that in, wrap it up with some values, we're good. That would not actually do the job in our opinion. So that's a great big topic of conversation that I would like to have with you at some point, but I appreciate you bringing it up. So important.
Yeah. All right. I think that was a great kind of response to a big question. And I think it's just encouraging us all to really think deeply about it. Let's transition. We're going to talk a little bit about another amazing initiative from Food Solutions New England. Any other questions that you guys have on that topic of the vision, you can share them with me. I can share my email. I will get them to Lisa and we can get them answered. But with that, let's talk about Racial Equity Challenge.
Yep. So thanks. This is something that a lot of you probably have seen in the ethers, even if you haven't participated yourself. In 2013, the network, Food Solutions New England Network, sort of came out publicly to say racial equity is a non-negotiable part of the food system that we're trying to build. And surprisingly, or maybe not, a lot of people are like, what does race have to do with food? These are completely, you're taking your eye off the ball here. This is not appropriate for Food Solutions New England to do. I have to give a ton of credit to our boss, Tom Kelly at the Sustainability Institute, who a lot of you know, and a lot of other people in the network to really stand firm on centering values. You know, values are a really important lens through which we not just talk about what we're trying to achieve, but how we achieve it. So the Racial Equity Challenge was one of the tools that was developed, inspired by Debbie Irving, the author Debbie Irving and activist Debbie Irving, and Dr. Eddie Moore Jr., who write about a 21-day practice. And then people in the network took that off the page and said, let's make it interactive for our network. And so in 2015, they launched the first interactive version of a 21-day racial equity habit building challenge for the food system community in our region. It was like 200 people participated. And everyone got a lot out of it. And ever since then, it's happened every April. This coming April will be the 8th year. And it changes a little bit every year. You know, we update the materials. We have a participatory planning team that updates what's in the challenge. And every year we try to, you know, enhance it a little bit based on the feedback. This past year, 2021, we actually hit 10,000 individual participants, all 50 states, 8 Canadian provinces, and like 42 countries. And we had over 900 participating organizations, and by that I mean businesses, foundations, schools, whatever, who said we're doing this as a group, or at least some of us are doing this as a group, so that we can like not just learn as individuals, but learn as like organizational entities and start centering equity and justice. So now I'll just say a few things about what's included these days. These are mostly all optional components that some people take advantage of, but as you know, there are 21 email prompts. We publish them daily. This year it'll be April 4th to the 25th. I know that in New Hampshire, some of you made use of this on a 21-week basis not too long ago. So that's available as well. And maybe we'll chat about that. We do have the sort of democratized approach of having a planning team. We'll be running a launch webinar, which will get recorded to kind of orient people to it. We have a facilitators orientation that recording that we'll be publishing next week, and some workshops. So anyone who wants to facilitate racial equity conversations in small groups with their, you know, your church group or your office or whoever, make sure you're on our mailing list. You can get an invitation to the 2.5-hour facilitator workshops, especially if you just want to build some confidence talking about racial equity and you're like maybe nervous about that. We'd love to have you be part of those. We have an online discussion forum every Friday during the challenge, those 3 weeks of the challenge. You can drop in for a Friday conversation. If you want some people to talk to, sometimes you'll meet new people from all around the world who are doing the challenge as well. We will support groups, and we have guest bloggers. So there's a lot now that goes on around the challenge, but the daily prompts are probably the core component. So yeah, there's not much to it other than saying, you know, again, as a communicator, communications professional, I just want to emphasize a trajectory that helps me a lot, understanding system change. And it's 3 A's are my memory device for this. Awareness building. I mean, sometimes people are very frustrated, and it's an American sort of character to be like, we have to get to action. What are we going to do? And they don't realize that awareness building is actually quite important. The second A is attitude changing, because you can only change the way you think about something if you are even aware that you have another possibility for thinking about it. So after awareness raising and attitude shifting, the third A is action. And that's, you know, you can change your actions, you can change your behaviors once, you know, your mind and your belief system allow that to be possible. So I just want to acknowledge, like, for some people, going across that whole spectrum of awareness raising to action changing can happen in 5 minutes. For some people, it's 5 years. I mean, we are all different, but I want to just make sure you understand there's value in all of those: awareness raising, attitude shifting, and action change. So don't get too frustrated if you feel like, oh gosh, we've been doing this forever. Yeah, we've been, dealing with this for 500 years. So this is a multi-generational project that we are trying to start to dismantle. So at that point, I just want to turn it back over to Colleen and maybe Aaron for some combo about the challenge and how it applies to NHFA. And I'll be here as a resource to that conversation if needed. So yeah.
Great.
Thank you,
so
Lisa.
much, Lisa. Wonderful. Colleen, did you want to jump in or? Okay. So yeah, just to give you all an update, the New Hampshire Food Alliance has a racial equity team. So we meet monthly to discuss the ways in which our organizations or businesses are trying to build and center equity, and also to just share ideas about what we might do as a network to move forward together. So as Lisa mentioned, a couple of years ago, we actually did the 21-day challenge over a series of 20 weeks, and we had about 25 participants in that. And those folks actually now make up the bulk of our racial equity team as well. But this year, our role, we really see our role as helping to encourage others in the New Hampshire Food Alliance network to participate in the challenge. And so so Colleen, of course, as our communications coordinator, is going to be getting materials out to all of you if you're on our newsletter and email list about how to participate. And we would love for you all to share it with your networks, with your organizations and friends and communities. This is the way that we can help get more people involved across New Hampshire. One of the other things that we're hoping to do as well is actually for our network cafe in May to have a really New Hampshire focused discussion around equity in the food system, sort of as a, let's reflect on what happened, what we learned in the challenge, and really try to think about equity here in New Hampshire's food system right now. We have some research going on and various research projects right now, sort of connected through New Hampshire Food Alliance and our partners looking at equity in the food system. The SPINE project that New Hampshire Hunger Solutions is looking at around nutrition equity. And then Olivia Saunders is heading up a project through Extension looking at equity in the New Hampshire food system. So we'll be able to bring some of that information and hopefully other experiences as well. So stay tuned for more information on that. And then, I would love to hear from those of you who are here today, any ideas that you have about, how can we as the Food Alliance help to support you all? What information do you need, in terms of, again, supporting participation and communication around the 21-day challenge. And maybe Lisa, you could start off with saying, I know that Food Solutions New England and you are putting together a lot of communication materials. If you could tell us a little bit about what you've got out there that we can then share with our network, that could be really helpful too.
Yes.
Oh, good. You've got it. It's in the chat.
Yeah, I accidentally shared my bio there, so disregard that because that's not important. But I did put a little link to the outreach kit for the challenge. There's just some general facts and data about the challenge, but at the bottom of the page are some graphics that you could use, some language for social media or email. So if you are in a situation where you want to invite others, either in your own circles or your broader networks, feel free to use those. Also, you can email me anytime if you feel like you want a custom version of something. I can usually turn it around real quick. If there's something that could be helpful, like a slide for a presentation or anything at all, anything we can be helpful with.
Wonderful. That's great. And Lisa, I don't know if you could, while we're waiting, folks, if you've got questions, again, pop them in the chat. You're also welcome to just raise your hand. Otherwise, we might not see you and you can unmute yourself and ask a question. But you mentioned something about just organizations participating in the challenge. And again, that's something that we really encourage our network partners to try to involve sort of larger groups. Could you give us an example of maybe how that works or how you've seen it work in the past with participants?
Absolutely. I think one of the most common expressions of organizational participation is that there's a small team or a couple of people that sort of be an anchor person for participation at their organization, their nonprofit, their business, whatever. And they sort of invite whoever in the organization to sign up for the challenge on the FSNE website. They say why it's happening, hopefully get leadership's support and involvement. I find it works best if leadership, including a board or some members of a board, are also participating and appreciating it. And then maybe schedule like a weekly lunch and learn facilitated conversation, maybe with a prompt question like, you know, what did you learn this week in the racial equity challenge that really stuck out for you or could be relevant for our work together? Or maybe a debrief after the challenge where we talk about were there aspects of this that feel like we could what's the right word, operationalize and change the way we work so that we are centering equity and justice in how we work. So, you know, it's hard if you have leadership or a board that doesn't really think this has any validity or is actively antagonistic. That's a whole other kettle of fish. But if there's interest, you know, starting small with a discussion group is really one of the best ways that, you know, and there's organizations that have now done this together many years in a row, and they find that they learn something new or it helps them onboard new team members to like a commitment to equity and justice.
Right. As you said, sort of building that awareness and attitude almost needs to come first before that commitment, that action. So this could be a great first step, even if your organization isn't yet committed to, say, doing a whole DEIJ process, right? This could be a good first step to start those conversations. Great. Any other questions or comments? Again, sort of, as I mentioned before, are there ways that you think that the Food Alliance can help with participation, things that you'd like to see us do to help support folks throughout the challenge? As Lisa mentioned, you guys are going to be doing these every Friday sort of lunchtime discussions, which I think are really helpful because sometimes just kind of doing the prompts and reading things yourself can feel a little overwhelming without that connection. So it's wonderful that you all are doing that. And it looks like Tanya has a question or a comment here. So Tanya from Fine, hi Tanya. Shared prompts and reflections in your Slack channel. Oh, great, which was a great and time-effective way to start conversations and share among staff and capture ideas for action. That's a great thought. So Tanya, I don't know if you'd feel comfortable jumping in and just letting us know, did you all participate last year sort of as an organization?
Yeah, we've participated at least, well, for several years now in different ways. And for me, I think this was the second time that that I participated in order to sort of help me really engage in the challenge more, because I was newer on staff. Doing it in the Slack channel was actually my idea, and so I would do the prompts each week and took that on because it enabled me to really dig into them, but then it also spurred a lot of conversation. And not everybody has a Slack channel, but if you have some sort of regular communication channel like that, it's really helpful. You could do it by email or something too, but it allowed everybody to weigh in when they had a moment to sort of sit and reflect on it a little bit, instead of trying to schedule a staff meeting around it, which sometimes can be a little hard to do with lots of different competing things. But it allowed us to make sure that we didn't get off track and like I said, it really just started a lot of conversations that we brought into staff meetings, and it kind of helped us think about it in lots of different ways.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Tanya.
Sure.
Great thought. Yeah, and thanks, Lisa, for putting that just examples of last year's prompts up in the chat so you have a sense of what's there. I think one of the things Karen Spiller, who is also part of Food Solutions New England and has helped to develop the challenge over the years, you know, we were talking the other day, and I think you mentioned this too, Lisa, but there's a lot of different ways to do the challenge. And I think sometimes it feels overwhelming. You think, oh my gosh, 21 days, I'm going to have to do so much reading and this and that. And, you know, I've participated over many years, and some years I'm much more engaged and I have more time and space to think about it. And other days, other years, I might just be able to engage once or twice a week. And that's okay. That I think I would encourage everybody to sign up, and it's there. And if this year you can't fully commit as an organization or just on your own, taking that first step and participating as much as you can, I think is great too.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And we're going to, every year we try to get better at this, Erin, but I'm glad you brought it up, because we're going to try to put little like time estimates on the activities for each day. You know, it might be like, this is a 3-minute read. This is a 15-minute read. This is a 7-minute video, which we did a little bit of, but we want to, you know, make it a little more clear so that people feel like, look, I only have 15 minutes today. I'm going to pick this and this, and that's fine. And it's also fine to skip a day entirely. No one's grading you. This isn't for credit. And, you know, as you can see on that website, the prompts will stay up throughout the whole year, so you can revisit the material when you want to. But it's not meant to make anyone feel bad because they can't get to it, you know, the way they want on 21 days.
Right. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, Yulia.
Just a quick thought. Have you guys thought about having like a mentorship program for some of the newer people who are joining, where they can get a little bit of a hands, you know, a helping hand to navigate this? I've participated 3 times, and I have to tell you, every time I was overwhelmed by the amount of information that I have to digest. And I'm not honest to this either. Like, I'm not unfamiliar with the situation. So just maybe having some kind of a
like a buddy system almost.
A buddy system or a Sherpa or somebody that you can bounce ideas off, or just thinking.
Yeah.
My personal experience with that.
Yeah, no, I think it's I think that's a great idea, and there's probably a few different ways to achieve some supports that might be helpful to people. You know, and also like which of them are self-organizing versus which we can support from UNH. You know, that's a great point. You know, people who feel like I really need someone to check in with or to give me some advice about this. That's a great way to think about it. And maybe in some of the subgroups like NHFA, there might be a mechanism to do that for one another a little bit as well. There are a lot of people who are just doing this as individuals, and they literally have no one to talk to about it. Like maybe they even live in a place where their own family isn't even really appropriate to talk to. I don't know, like there's so many cultural variations with this. So yeah, I think that's great. I'm going to put that in the idea hopper, Yulia, you know, the magical corridor of ideas that we always have more of than we can do, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. And let's all be angling to find a way.
And maybe at least for this year, I like that idea a lot, Yulia. Maybe if you're not going to be doing it as part of an organization or your work or whatever, find a buddy, convince a friend or a neighbor or somebody to sign up with you, and you can connect with them once a week to check in about things. I think that could really bring a lot of richness to the experience. Yeah.
Can I make one last remark, Erin? And then
of course.
I want to acknowledge that, you know, we're in New Hampshire, and some people who maybe are based in a publicly funded setting or a school might be grappling with the impact of this divisive concepts legislation that's running around the country. in various places. And so if that stuff is giving you pause, feel free to reach out to us, because we've been starting to put together some resources to help people with that. I don't necessarily want to give that conversation more public oxygen than it deserves, but at the same time, it's real for some people. So if you are struggling around that and your ability to even convene your coworkers on a conversation because you're worried about that,
Right.
get in touch with us, and I bet we can, connect you with some resources to either assuage your worries or something. So I don't want to leave that elephant out of the room, because it's a thing right now.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Reach out
Yeah.
if you-
And we actually have discussed that as potentially being part of the New Hampshire specific cafe, sort of giving an update and kind of how is that impacting the way that we're able to have these discussions.
Yeah.
But thanks for offering to be a resource on that, Lisa.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much, Lisa, for talking about all of the amazing work that FSNE does. I think it's really important for us, even though the New Hampshire Food Alliance is really focused on New Hampshire in many ways and building out our statewide network. We always want to emphasize how important it is to be connected to our wider region. And we are working with partners across the region. And so we're so grateful to have you doing the work that you're doing, and look forward to continue to find ways to align ourselves and synergize with all of our work. So thanks again for being here. And I know we have a couple just quick announcements and encouragements. I think I had mentioned before, and Lisa had mentioned, that New England Feeding New England, which is a partner regional effort, really looking at some of the research surrounding supply chains and building a more resilient food system, has an update next Tuesday. I've got the link to register if you're interested in learning more there. And then I'll turn it over to Colleen for a reminder about our statewide gathering.
Yeah, coming up not so soon, hoping when there's warmer weather in May, our statewide gathering, which is one of the events that this New Hampshire Food Alliance puts on every year. We are hoping for it to be in person up in Plymouth. The registration is open now, so I'll share a link in the chat so you can check things out, but that'll be kind of a chance for everybody to reconnect. We're going to be doing a lot of networking and kind of activities amongst our usual kind of breakout sessions and content that is really focused on the food system issues we talk about regularly. So take a look, stay tuned. There'll be a lot more information coming out, but definitely think about registering if you are interested.
Yeah, early bird registration has a bit of a discount, so that's open now. All right, everybody, thanks so much for being here. As always, have a wonderful weekend. Thanks again to Lisa for being here as well. And we'll see you all soon.